Hello and welcome to PJNet TV. In this video segment, I call My Perspective and Comments. Another busy week in our nation and around the world. I want to start with the circus that we've witnessed over this past week trying to impeach our President Trump. And folks, once again, we see the Democrats putting forth what they think is a show that's going to be positive for them and try and tear down this president. And all I can say is that we heard the same old thing over and over and over again. And I want to talk a bit about what I don't know if everyone that's listening is familiar with the turntable and the records back in the day, where everyone had a platter or a turntable where they would put records on and they would play music. And as your favorite record you'd put on would get worn and sometimes it would get a crack in it. And what would take place is when it hit that crack, it would bounce the needle back forward again. So you'd be hearing the same music over and over, and when it hit that crack, it would bounce it back. So you'd go back 2 or 3 verses, and then you'd hear the same thing playing over and over and over. And that's what reminded me of watching and listening to this. Now, folks, all full disclosure, I listened to the summary. I couldn't take, to sit down and watch this this circus, but I did get some summary regarding this circus from the Democrats. But I want to kind of encapsulate everything and bring it down to one statement that Adam Schiff had to say. And again, we had Adam Schiff, one of the individuals, members, bringing their accusation along with Nadler and some other senators. But I think Adam Schiff encapsulates it all. And I think it's what the Democrat playbook really is. And what he ended up saying yesterday was the president's misconduct cannot be decided at the ballot box. Now, folks, what did Adam Schiff just say, and what have the Democrats really been saying? Because this has been echoed from other Democrats, that the American people can't be trusted to vote a president in. And the Democrats are going to do everything to make sure that that doesn't happen again, and they're going to take your vote away. If you voted for Donald Trump, that's what Adam Schiff is saying, is we're going to impeach this. You made a mistake. America made a mistake by electing Donald Trump. And this attempt from the beginning of President Trump's presidency, they've been trying to impeach our president. And that is the message that the Democrats are sending, is you can't be trusted to vote for the president. Unfair, really illegal, but that's the mindset of these Democrats nowadays. But I wanted to talk, the Democrats can rail against the Republicans, rail against the American people, rail against Donald Trump. But what has been going on while they're stamping their feet and saying this president's got to go? Couple weeks, so let's do a quick review. Couple of weeks ago, we had some tremendous news when it comes to the economy. And once again, our economy's strong. The black and Hispanic women unemployment breaking records. GDP strong all time. More jobs we don't have enough people to fill the jobs that are out there right now. Strong economic news. And now it's bolstered from last week. We see the USMCA. What is that, you might ask? That is the old NAFTA. We got rid of the NAFTA because, as Donald Trump has said, we were losing big time with in that agreement. And Ross Perot, when they initially brought NAFTA, said that what would take place is you'd hear a giant sucking sound going where jobs, companies would be going out of this nation to Mexico. And Ross Perot was right, and President Trump was right to renegotiate. So now the USMCA has been negotiated. So we have the US, Canada, and Mexico agreement, and that's going to more level the playing field. It's also going to our farmers have been taking a big hit because of what's been taking place with China and the tariffs, and even with this USMCA not getting passed because Congress has been occupied doing other things, if you know what I'm saying, folks. But now we have those two situations. China. Now there's a first step with China, but I mean the stock market took a good aggressive upward when the first step with China. What is that going to do? We're going to be able to have more goods going into China, and it's again more of a level playing field. Now this is the first step with China. I mean there's other things, intellectual theft that China is still engaging in. We're going to have to deal with that. But right now, President Trump's leadership in the area of saying enough is enough with China is paying dividends. Some other things to talk about when it comes to some successes that President Trump has been exhibiting. You know, you may not hear these lapdogs in the media, the liberal media, but things have been taking place, like legislation that now, I don't know if you're familiar with baby tourism. What has been taking place is you'd have women, primarily coming from China, more affluent families or women coming over, and what they would be doing is being 6 to 7 months, 8 months pregnant, coming to the U.S. to vacation and having their baby here. Well, what does that mean? That means that the baby is a U.S. citizen. So when it comes to China, they don't come to stay. They just come to get their baby to become a U.S. citizen, and they go back. Unlike the anchor babies from people coming from the south of the border, and they're looking to come across, have their baby, and then grab all the benefits in the U.S. and move in here. But I want to point out that President Trump, his administration now, when it comes to the baby tourism, there's more discretion, and now those that are looking at those visas can have more authority to reject an individual coming into this country. More latitude. Now that's not to say that they're going to reject everyone, but they do have now the ability to say no. Under Obama, you couldn't. That was a no-no. Everybody comes in, no matter what, when under the Obama administration. The other thing too, President Trump trying to do what he can, because he's getting fought tooth and nail from the Democrats. They don't want to pass anything when it comes to securing the border. But what has taken place is President Trump has been putting pressure on Mexico to step up. And these caravans that were coming over earlier in the year and last year, there's a decline in that. But we had just this past week, there was a caravan coming from Honduras, and they were going to play the same game where they were going to caravan right up to the U.S. border. Well, guess what, folks? The Mexican National Guard stopped them in their tracks, got some transportation, and headed them right back to Honduras. Vamos! Don't come back. So some great news in that realm, that President Trump's leadership in putting more pressure on Mexico to do their part and to stop this migration through their country. Now, I want to be clear, folks. I agree with President Trump when it comes to legal immigration. They can do that all day long, legally. But it's the illegal immigration that we have to stop as a nation. And you listen to the Democrats and these liberals, hey, that's racist. You can't say illegal alien. Lawbreakers, breaking the law, coming across this country and sneaking across the border. That is breaking the law. And President Trump means to put a stop to that. And I agree wholeheartedly for those efforts that President Trump has been making to try and secure our border. Folks, I'd like to talk a bit about another area kind of that President Trump has been pivotal regarding and we've seen this displayed with some recent terrorists getting taken off the battlefield. So I want to talk about what President Trump, when he campaigned, and once again a promise kept that he was going to build up the military, and that the handcuffs that in fighting these ISIS and these terrorists, he was going to take in Afghanistan, taking off the cuffs. And in order to do that, he had to build up our military, because Obama was, hey, we want the military. Under Obama's administration, the rules of engagement were really handcuffing and hamstringing our troops. And the budget went down under Obama. President Trump has turned that around. But I want to touch on, yes, there's investment, there's money that is involved in order for us to build our military. But I want to talk about one tool that was in the forefront. And I want to take us back to 1967. And that was, we had the Vietnam War was taking place, and at that point it was actually getting winding down at that point. But Vietnam was a struggle, it was a stain, and there were some challenges, as we all know, in Vietnam. But what I want to talk about is what was taking place in the air. We had, we were mismatched in Vietnam, and they had what the Vietnamese were using North Vietnamese were using Russian MiGs, and they were maneuverable. Our planes weren't as maneuverable, they were more bulky, and we weren't superior in the air. We did not have air superiority. And one of the things that if you look back at Vietnam, a lot of those men that were in the POW camps were many were pilots. But in 1968, the generals got together and said, we have to come up with a fighter plane that would be able to challenge and to bring back air superiority that the America needed. And they had brought the contractors in, Lockheed, many other contractors, and McDonnell Douglas got the contract to build a fighter plane. And within 2+ years, about 2.5 years, 30 months, the first fighter plane rolled off the out of McDonnell Douglas and onto the tarmac. And that plane was the F-15. Yes, this F-15. People looked at it, impressive, very impressive, but one of the thoughts was, this plane is larger. Will it be, and the questions were, will it be able to maneuver and effectively against, say, the MiG, which was very maneuverable at the time. So it rolled off in 68. In 1970, and the name was the F-15 Eagle. But the first time that this plane was really put into action in real life, it wasn't that the Americans were fighting a war or anything like that. What took place was that, well, let me back up a step. When this plane came out, there were countries that looked at this plane. Israel looked at it. And Israel said, we want these. And they bought those in mid-70s, 72, 73. They trained on it. It wasn't Americans flying them. There were the Israeli pilots were trained on the F-15. Well, in 1979, Syria attacked Israel, and Syria were using the MiGs, fighter planes. Well, there's when this happened, the first day that this happened, there was a fighter pilot, Moshe Melnick, and he was the captain, and he was the first to be called up to engage this Russian MiG. And this particular account actually was recorded, and this story is told regarding this particular skirmish. But he came up against the MiG, and the F-15 held its own, and he was able to take down the MiG, and success after success after success, that the F-15 undefeated, and the Israelis were the first to use the F-15 in actual combat. Now, I want to talk a bit about this fighter plane and the technology. One was the superior radar. The radar was equipped high tech, but what it could do was to be able to, the radar could go and look beyond the pilot's vision, 25, 30 miles out. It could detect a plane coming in, and it could actually tell what type of plane it was, if it was a MiG or if it was a passenger plane. So what this allowed the pilot was to be able to, and this technology would be able to allow a pilot to lock on to a MiG, fire the missile, the rocket, and take that plane out before that plane could, or the pilot could even detect that they were coming into danger. So high technology there with the F-15, and it proved itself. Now, the first time that the U.S. got involved and was in combat was in between the early 90s and 95, and that was the Serbian, the war that took place there in Serbia. Now, Slobodan Milosevic was the president. Milosevic was the president of that country, and what was taking place is a ethnic genocide, and it was killing off Croatians, Bosnians, and it was an outrage to the world, and there was an outcry, and that murders, rapes, torture, you name it, that this was happening. The U.S. got involved and led NATO. But this was the first time that the U.S. was going to not have troops on the ground, but it was going to be a total air engagement. And what ended up happening is that they launched from aircraft carriers, and they flew in and they bombarded. They took out the air support, they took out anti-aircraft, and they took over the skies. And the Serbians, they also had the MiG. So once again, the U.S. had air superiority, stopping the atrocity that was taking place. So two instances: Israelis, lives were saved; Serbians, lives were saved. And I just want to talk about, we hear a lot from the left and a lot from the Hate America crowd how evil this nation is. Well, this technology was used to save lives, and we have to push back against those that America can't do anything right. We're an evil nation. No, God has blessed us with the ability and our capitalist structure to be able to have the technology and to be able to make our minds up to put these technologies into play. And that's exactly what has taken place. I also want to talk a bit as a close out here. What we've been seeing with regards to the climate change and talking about almost like the sky is falling situation. And in the scriptures, it talks about Jesus saying, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end." Now, folks, I ask you, is God sitting around and saying, "Man, I didn't see that coming"? Is he bewildered? Does he know what's going on tomorrow? Yes, he does. As a matter of fact, the technology of the F-15, God knew that Syria was going to attack Israel, and the atrocities that took place years before that plane ever came off the assembly line. So God isn't caught by surprise. We have a God, he's the beginning and the end. He knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And we can we can be secure in that. We can walk in boldness because God is already there. And I would say to my to those ones that are talking climate change, the Greta Thunbergs of the world, would somebody tap her on the shoulder and say, look, the world's going to end in 10 years? God is not going to be caught by surprise. And is someone going to say a prayer about, well, Jesus, you better come in before 10 years, because the earth is going to be destroyed and nobody's going to be able to survive on this earth? That's not what the word tells me. Jesus is coming back to this earth again. So, when you hear the 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, you can say, wait a minute, our Lord is not caught by surprise and thinking, well, man, I didn't know, that we had such shorter time. Our Lord, Jesus said, I am the Alpha and the Omega. We can be secure in that God is already, whatever is coming our way, God knows. And we can take comfort in that and keep our eyes on Him. Ask Him for direction, because He knows the steps that we need to take to be successful and to move on in this world. And that's my perspective and comment.